Hello there. A very, very warm welcome to the CDP Awards Europe 2024. Move the money with Euronews. My name is Maeve McMahon and I'm thrilled to be your host this afternoon for this spectacular event with a breathtaking backdrop taking place in the sidelines of the ChangeNOW Summit. On the agenda for the CDP Awards today, meeting leaders from the business, financial and government sector to ask, how do we move the money at the pace and scale required to keep that 1.5 alive? We'll be asking companies and also cities how they can fund that future. And we'll also debate the systemic changes needed in our economic system. A warm welcome as well to all those watching us on the live stream today. A whole clip will be available a little bit later on the ChangeNOW website. But for those in the room, it won't all be serious. There will be time for networking, for mingling, for catching up, lots of coffee breaks, and also a private tour of the Solutions and Arts exhibition on display here at the ChangeNOW Summit. But of course, as you know, the CDP Awards is all about you and your achievements, the fact that you are paving the way and leading the way towards this tricky transition. It's all about the CDP A-lists and companies and cities that we'll be meeting a little bit later. And if you need information on the full programme, it's on your badge. You can just scan the QR code and you'll have all the information that you need there. And as you can imagine, of course, we have an amazing array of guests coming up on stage throughout the afternoon. And the first is none other than the founder of the ChangeNOW Summit, Santiago Lefebvre. I must say, Santiago, you're looking very fresh for someone who's been running this incredible summit with thousands of people for 3 days.
Well, we have a super team, I would say. That's why it's so fresh. But it's a real pleasure to welcome you here on this stage of ChangeNOW, as you say, with this amazing backdrop here.
And tell us, how come you decided to found this summit? And how does it feel having the CDP Awards celebrated here with you?
Yeah, well, the story is that at the really beginning, I've got inspired by some entrepreneurs willing to develop solutions for cleaning up the ocean, helping refugees, creating more circular economy. And those entrepreneurs were left alone. You know, they didn't have any support. They didn't find their peers. Didn't have the investments. And so we wanted to create a place where all those entrepreneurs and business leaders could find a way to scale their solutions. And so this is how ChangeNOW started. The first edition was in 2017, and now it's the 7th, and you are here in the world's largest event of solutions for the planet, with 35,000 participants joining and 1,000 solutions showcased here.
Well, it looks very inclusive too. I believe it'll be open to the public tomorrow. There's young people as well all over today, students, schoolgoers. But just on that word solutions, because of course that's what everyone in this room is after, real practical solutions. What solutions can they see on display at the summit that are fitting with our theme today, which is of course, move the money?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want also to say that something that makes the link also with CDP Awards is the fact that we have people champions and entrepreneurs championing transition, big companies championing this transition, cities also. And here, if we go into the solutions, for example, who are championing this transition, you have, for example, NovaBiome. NovaBiome, they are doing depollution of the soils, you know, of heavy metals, etc., using fungi and mycelium. And so they analyze what is the pollution, and they find the bacteria who's working against that pollution, and so they're unable to decontaminate the soil in a biological way. There is no chemicals used for that, and so that's something pretty cool, I think.
That is pretty cool, and I like concrete examples. And just when it comes to the data that the CDP is collecting, how crucial is that when it comes to solutions?
Well, it's very important, you know, because here, all the solutions that are here just are waiting to find customers, visibility, money, someone who could offer some help. And we have a lot of stories here that happened during the different years of people saying, I've met my first customer here, or I found my investor, or even sometimes talent. There is a lot of recruitment. We don't know it very directly, but there is a lot of people also joining the solutions that are showcased here also.
So a lot of magic happening here at the ChangeNOW Summit in Paris. Thank you so much, Santiago Lefebvre, and congrats. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to invite up on stage a very familiar face from the CDP, our host today and one of the main organisers of the CDP Awards 2024, Maxfield Weiss.
Hi, Maeve. It's great to see you again.
It is so lovely to see you, and what a spectacular location for the CDP Awards 2024. How has the year been for you, from a CDP perspective, of course?
You know, I'm going to dive into that in just a moment, but what I wanted to start out with is to say to all the companies, to the investors, to the financial institutions, to the policymakers, to the cities, to all the A-listers in the room, to all of you, welcome to the CDP Europe Awards. Now, Maeve, let's dive into your question. Over this past year, there is just a simple, modest phrase that really captured the world's attention, and this is transition away. These two words that came out of COP28, they really didn't meet our expectations, perhaps, and they might not have been the two words that we were hoping to hear, but they really marked a pivotal moment. And this is that it sent an unmistakable signal to both investors and to corporations that our transformation is inevitable, right? So, what do we need to do? What we need to do is we need to follow the money. And that is precisely what we're going to do today. And when that happens, we're going to find that we still have such a long way to go. This past year, fossil fuel subsidies, they surged to a record $7 trillion, right? So this is something that is more than the GDP of Germany, Japan, and India combined. This is dwarfing the investments that we need to make in our ecological and energy transition. So what this requires, Maeve, is more than just profound rhetoric. What we need is we need to fundamentally shift the way we operate. We need large-scale investments into our financial institutions because the very survival of the organizations within this room rely upon it. So what we need to do is we need to shift away and evolve from exploiting nature, and we need to go towards protecting it. What we also need to do is we need to adopt and adapt to Europe's fast-changing regulatory landscape. Because, Maeve, what we need to do is we need to move the money. We need to move the money to ensure we could stay adapted to a nature and climate positive environment for the future. We need to move the money to ensure a climate resilient future for generations to come.
And as someone based in Brussels, I'm following very carefully all that legislation being cooked up there. Fascinating times, but also, of course, very challenging, but very necessary. Can you tell our participants here, what should they expect from today's program?
You know, I think what we might want to start to look at is what is the theme of today's program about. And if you look just behind me, let's take a look at the structure. Financial ingenuity is what brought the Eiffel Tower to life. It is the classic first example of when we have private investments and public investments working together, and what is the classic first example of modern project finance, interestingly enough. And what is the result of this? Well, the result is innovative engineering, innovative architecture, and financial wins for both sides. It also marks a pivotal moment. It is an empowering symbol of what it takes to work together to get to real-world solutions. And that's why I'm so excited that today we're going to be launching the CDP Europe report with our partners, Oliver Wyman, and it is going to highlight the financial gridlocks that we are facing, which are underpinning our climate and nature crisis. So what we need to do is we need to activate everybody in this room to be the architects of our sustainable future, to move the money.
And what should people here look out for then on today's program?
You know, today's program is going to be a fascinating one, and we're going to start out by hearing about the financial hurdles that businesses and cities face, and the real-world solutions that all of you can put into place to adapt and find solutions to fund your future. We're then going to zoom out, Maeve, and we're going to take a look at the underpinnings of our economy and what we need to do to structurally fix them and lay the foundations for a more resilient tomorrow. But what we really need to do is we need to ask ourselves some really fundamental questions. How can we transform traditional business models? How could we move capital to fund an innovation for technology within our future? And how can regulation create the right environment for investments? And what does this mean? What does this challenging economic and geopolitical moment finally mean for our ability to do what? To finally move the money.
And where does CDP sit in this discussion?
You know, that's a great question. And when I think about it, if you look to COP28, it hosted the first ever global stock take this past year. And what CDP does is we actually stock take every single year for non-state actors. This past year, we had 23,000 organizations disclose their environmental data. This represents 90% of European market capitalization. This is all your data. And your data is a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool to increase access to capital. It drives business efficiency and ensures that we can comply with regulation. But all we need to do to ensure that we stay on track for this transition, do you know what we need to do, Maeve? We just need to look at the CDP A-list leaders, because you all are what is going to make this possible, because we need all companies, we need all investors and financial institutions and cities to step up, because you all are best prepared to move the money. And then from there, well, guess what? CDP data, it's going to continue to shine a spotlight. It's going to show us what is possible and empower all of the organizations in this audience today to be able to look around the corner, see what's coming next, and move beyond regulation that can only take us so far. Because what we need to do is to ensure that you are the designers, you are the builders of a more sustainable future towards a path that will create an economy that is net zero and nature positive.
I'm feeling very inspired. Are you? Yeah. Wow. Any final words for our audience?
Yeah, well, you know, before I get to my final thoughts, there's just a few things that I need everybody in this audience to do today. First of all, enjoy yourself. Enjoy the view. Enjoy the ChangeNOW space. Enjoy the food. Enjoy connecting with colleagues and embarking on new conversations and picking up on old ones. And if you see anyone in the room today wearing a red badge, that is a CDP staff member. So stop them, say hello to them, ask them how they're creating an economy that works for people and planet, because this is a problem that is not going to be easy to fix. So what we need to remember is it starts with innovative financial thinking. Without actionable insights from data and without the power of partnerships, this view behind me would look very different. So I have a challenge for each and every one of you in the audience today, to all the companies out there. What we need you to do is shift your spending to more sustainable investments and more sustainable solutions to create secure supply chains. To all of the investors within the room, the financial institutions, we need you to collaborate together to spread the risk. And finally, to all the policymakers, to the cities, the local governments in the room, we need you to create the right conditions to scale up green investments. This is going to be pivotal, because without all of you, without your work, if we do not move the money fast enough, the view behind me is going to look very different. And I think what is at stake is much more than just a monument. We are running out of time, Maeve, because the time is now. The Earth's future is in our hands. Maeve, humanity's future in our hands. The time is now. It's time to move the money.
It is indeed. Thank you so, so much, Maxwell Weiss, for setting the scene for today's CDP Awards 2024.
Thank you, Maeve.
And of course, a little bit later tonight, we'll be seeing Maxwell Weiss once again. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to kick off with our very first panel and pick apart a little bit of what Max said there about how businesses and cities need to fund their future. But of course, the question is how? As we heard there, everyone in this room knows that there's an urgent need for organizations to fundamentally overhaul their operations and strategies to integrate sustainability very deeply. But we want to know now how companies are doing this, how they're finding their funds to secure the future, and how, of course, they're using data in critical areas of their transition. So I'm thrilled to say that we have leaders today from the Banque de France, Emmanuel Assoine, who could join us here on stage. We also have the CEO of Givaudan, Gilles André, who can join us as well up on stage. Good to see you. We also have the Mayor of the City of Turku, Mina Arve. Good to see you. And also the CEO of Beiersdorf, Vincent Varnery. You're very welcome. Thank you so much. I wanted to start off on a positive note, but first I would like to admire your beautiful shoes that can kick off this very optimistic tone that we're going to kick off this panel on, and just see, for example, first talk about the opportunity for mobilizing investment in your sector. Vincent, should we start with you?
If you want. The complexity for us, is that we're in a consumer business. Beiersdorf is not well known. This is a company of Nivea. And when we started to be interested in sustainability, we thought that it was making sense to ask consumers to pay for it, which was not a good idea because consumers just told us, that's your problem. You have to deliver the right product. You have to be green. You have to be sustainable. Don't expect us to pay more for that. And this is why we enter into a very complicated situation where we have heavy costs. We have to bear the cost or to try to reduce the cost because, but consumers have sustainability at heart, but not only close to the wallet. And then be able, to come with the right proposals and to transform the society.
Emmanuel, would you like to take that same question?
So for us, as I'm from Banque de France, so the Central Bank of France, part of the Euro system, and for us, there is a strong need to have a real recognition of what the climate change can make as a risk, but for price stability and financial stability. So that's why we act in this regard, and that's why we consider that we have to be very proactive under our different hats and as an example for the rest of the financial system.
Thank you so much for that. And Gilles, just from your perspective there, where do you see the most opportunity for mobilizing investment?
So Givaudan, we are making what Vincent is selling to the consumers smell good. Also, we make things taste good for other clients. So obviously, we are extremely committed to the sustainability journey with all its dimensions. And despite the fact that the quantities that we put in a Nivea cream for Vincent is actually a fraction of a percentage. It makes the whole difference when, for example, a formulation is being reformulated to remove some of the non-carbon, non-renewable carbon parts, and therefore by making the new formulation smell good, the consumer suddenly is going to be equally attracted, even if it's for the same price. So that's the indirect contribution that we have, and we also have a direct contribution by making the 16,000 different raw mats that we use in our formulations also sustainable going forward. But it's a very long journey and hard work.
And on that long journey and the hard work, what about you, from your perspective of the mayor of a city? Listening to the words there of Maxwell Weiss, I mean, in reality, in the day-to-day, how can you translate what he's saying into reality?
Well, coming from Finland, which is now already 7th time in a row the most happiest nation in the world, maybe because of my pink shoes. But seriously, I think one of the reasons could be there that we take things seriously and have a really relying on research and science. And in Turku, we have a very holistic approach to whole climate issues. We want to think it's not only the reduction of the emissions, but it's also the strengthening the biodiversity and enhancing the circular economy. And while this kind of holistic approach is integrated with different levels of decision making, then you really get something into done. And in the keynote we are here before us, there was this follow money. And I like that idea because when you find the money, you actually need to get those structures done where you get systemic and scalable solutions. And otherwise you cannot succeed. And here, the financing is actually the most powerful tool to use that. And if it comes to cities, the financing, there are financing, for instance, for EU available, but it's quite fragmented at the moment. So what cities would actually need is more accessible and not so fragmented financing. and that also to support for kind of understanding this holistic approach as well as finding those financing solutions. So there is also the accessibility and then flexibility for the financing.
And is that something that the bank could help with?
From the financial system perspective, what we need and what we have already is, like in Europe, a very strong financial system with strong banks, large insurers, large asset managers, which should help as far as funding the transition. What we have as well is a lot of excess savings. A lot of these excess savings are employed abroad in the US mainly. What we could look for is to have this excess saving, funding the climate transition here in Europe. So what we need is to try to rechannel the excess savings towards the funding of sustainable investments. What we need, maybe what we lack a little bit, is to have viable investment projects, because we have a lot of money, there's something available there, but we might lack a little bit of those investments which should support the funding. And what we also lack a little bit is, have the right credible framework, even though we are progressing quite fast in Europe in that regard, on harmonized data set, just to provide the investors the confidence that they invest in really green products and that they are not greenwashing their money. So there we have a little bit of room for further improvement, but we are confident that the regulatory pathway in Europe helps in this regard and is ambitious enough to help.
Okay, super interesting. So as you're saying there, the money is there. So perhaps, Gilles, you could give us some examples of capital raised for major investments.
Well, it takes different facets. Obviously, I've seen, so I'm happy to have done the CEO job for 20 years. So I've seen a bit of an evolution where investors, which were more sustainability driven, putting sustainability targets in their whole portfolio, positioning that with their investors, has helped, us also be encouraged in valuing some of the things that we are doing. So that's the first one. The second one that we did more internally is actually to put at some point, a price for the carbon. So we took I don't want to start a debate there, but 90 euros, I think, which helps a lot, when we think about CapEx, because suddenly the business case looks different. You say, I'm going to invest a little more, and because I'm going to have those cost avoidance on carbon, this is going to be justified. And that's really helping also moving the needle and doing things differently on the CapEx side. We are also, we are actually close to being 100% renewable electricity in terms of energy. And there, we have a full, we have 7 billion companies spending about 300 million of CapEx. And out of that, we have 20, 30 million fully dedicated at making the energy transition. There's no return on that, just, committing on our CO2 reduction. So those are examples, but I echo what Vincent says. At the end of the day, nobody pays for it except us as companies, because the consumer doesn't want to pay it. Therefore, my client doesn't want to pay for it, and we have to find ways to do that. But those are constraints, and I think constraints also help innovate and move the needle going forward.
Would you agree with what you're hearing
I
there?
agree with him. I took an example that we have in common. This is a product everybody knows. This is
Labello.
Labello, Nivea Lip. It's a very nice product. This is it's a market leader everywhere in the world. There was double plastic. There was the formula who had some oils. We were putting that in a blister in plastic. So we moved to something else, which is that new formula, recycled plastic, and box in paper. How do you want me to ask consumers to pay more for that? I cannot, because the guy is saying, okay, it's my Labello, it is the same, except that costs 150 million. That costs 150 million that I have to absorb in my cost. Again, I cannot make consumer pay for that, but I have to absorb that. And we believe this is right to do that because this is also a product which is used by young women, by young men also, and this is a kind of trademark for us. But there are also other investments that I would say it's part of our homework, and like Gilles, we have to do it. There are other investments where we need others to move. I give you the example of recycled plastic. I'm not producing recycled plastic. I'm using recycled plastic for the bottles of Nivea, of Eucerin. The issue I have is I don't have the right quality. So I have to pay 30–40% more for recycled plastic, but often my recycled plastic is grayish, doesn't smell good. So then I'm struggling with the beautiful perfumes of Givaudan. And my consumer says, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. You know, I had to stop some projects because of the quality of the plastic, because of the lack of investment, because you know that recycled plastic, just have to put the wrong ingredient into a bin, and then your plastic is destroyed. That's one of the big challenges for us. You know, that for all of us, for L'Oréal, Antoine, all of us, is to get the right quality of recycled plastic and having people investing on that.
May I?
Absolutely.
Maybe I don't want to be polemist there, but I think that we have the transition risks that we are looking at closely from a financial stability perspective. And here there are some investments that we cannot discard, that we cannot avoid, whoever pays for it, because otherwise it's a transition risk for the firm, the possibility to lose the business and the consumer, because there will be a lack of interest from consumers because of a change in behavior. And what we try to assess from our perspective, from a supervisor, is how the firms can manage this transition pathway in order to abide and to follow the trends that are expected from a transition perspective. And doing anything else than going forward on a transition path completely fit for the Paris goals would be quite erratic from our perspective, from a financial perspective.
I agree, but the issue is that, you know, the famous story of a scope 1 and 2 and 3. You know, there are a few companies saying very proudly they are able to reduce dramatically the scope 1 and 2 CO2 emissions. For us, it's 95% is scope 3. Scope 3 is what is given to us. You know, again, the recycled bottles, which I'm not doing myself. So we are in a journey which is we are doing our work, but we need the full chain, you know, the full value chain to do their work, to finance the right investment for us to deliver against this roadmap, which I agree with you is indisputable.
And to add on what Vincent said, you know, what has also helped us very much to ensure the transition is, you know, because everybody is the scope 3 of somebody else. You know, I am his scope 3, but somebody else is my scope 3. You know, when we really started in the journey, I mean, I was shocked, you know, by the lack of data, of accurate data, especially when you deal with highly specialized things that we do. And so it didn't prevent many companies and companies like ours to actually shoot for the moon and to say by X, you know, will be 70% less CO2. But in this journey, it's about getting the granularity of data and moving away from all those proxies, approximation, and I'm a French, you know, in the world of Cartesian, so staying away from that so that you can really make decisive, sort of informed decisions when we formulate, when we make a choice, which has a much bigger impact down the road than, you know, making those decisions on just assumptions. You know, I take the example of the perfumer when they formulate, you know, then if they can really make the choice between this and that, having the exact CO2 weight for each ingredient, that makes a huge difference and that helps moving the needle.
Okay.
If I give you a scale from the city perspective, give you an example, we are, as a Turku, we are one of the 100 carbon neutral and smart cities by European, so in the mission cities, and we are going to be carbon neutral by 2029. Within this mission, we made our climate city contract, which was accepted last week. And there we have promised that our investment plans for this decennium to be carbon neutral are about 3 billion euros, which means basically the city and the city-owned companies. All those investments, we have very strict rules for us to be, that they really are green. And we are following like EU taxonomy, we are following all measurements. And that's what we are coming to the concrete example while we are actually doing those planning for example, for a school. And we know that the school is actually today, it's a really expensive one. The schools in general are very expensive ones. But if you put there the green, those requirements also, so you actually pay few million euros more than without those green requirements that we have put for ourselves. Obviously, if we will do that with the whole investment plan, it's a huge, huge sum of money, and this should be solved also somehow for the front-runner cities to have this motivation to do these kind of investments and have really the impact that we are trying to get. And that's why I say that the green transition is not going to happen unless it's happened in the local level as well. Of course, we need the national level, EU level, global level, all those as well, together with businesses. But if the cities are not implementing this, so then it's not going to happen.
And what untapped opportunities are you also looking into, want to access funds?
Sorry?
What untapped opportunities are you looking into?
There are quite a few, for instance. For instance, public-private partnerships are something that we should actually look into more. And in our size of the city, it's even more practical than in many places. We do actually have a very much cooperation with our local businesses. I'll give you one example. We have a big Bayer pharmaceutical site in our city, and they made a new investment for the new site. And it was a huge investment, 250 million euro investment, and it's their globally first site within Bayer which is carbon neutral because of that they could use that sustainable energy that we are providing for them. So these kind of collaboration are very strategic, but they can also be a very competitive advantage for the cities if you manage to do those in right ways. Another issue is in a smaller scale with the procurements, it's quite big scale for the cities and public organizations to have these kind of pre-market dialogues before those actual procurement processes together with businesses in order to get those green targets to be developed, delivered in the end of the day. And the third one is that I've already mentioned that we have looked the EU sustainability taxonomy and kind of evaluated our own investments against it. But we still see that it's not very suitable for the city perspective. So that should be developed into the more urban fitting kind of approach or that way. So that would help cities to really also get into right deliveries.
The right deliveries. Okay, and just coming back to the perspective from Banque de France, Emmanuel, because later we'll be hearing more about the CDP Europe report that's released today, and it highlights, in fact, a hesitation among commercial banks to finance climate projects. Why is that?
I wouldn't say, hesitation. I am a little bit hesitant using hesitation. What we see is actually that we have a lot of initiatives from the different commercial banks in order to accompany the real economy on the transition pathway.
So what are banks really looking to invest in then?
So what we have as maybe has a little bit of obstacles, of impediments, is of course the capacity to decipher amongst the lot of data that we have, the ones which are very useful, and the ones which will not, make something like we are not financing brown activities, only green activities, because what we need to do is to finance the transitions, to ensure that the real economy, the one which is not yet green, become greener. And we have to help all the different entities in the ecosystem to get on that pathway. So what we need is, and what we are setting in place, is to have transition planning activities, taking ground on the data which are starting to be gathered because of the EU regulation, which is great, the CSDR and all the different regulations in that regard. But we have to make that according to transition information. And here we have the latest directive on due diligence, which will be a big, big help in this regard, and hopefully it has been adopted in order to enforce transition planning for all the different stakeholders, different firms, corporates, either financial or not financial. And in this regard, we are very eager to help, to support. We are in the process of developing for the firms, so for the non-financial corporates, a climate indicator in Banque de France. So trying to assess where the firms are compared to a sectoral transition pathway in order to see whether they are beyond, above, below the expectations. And maybe one last word for financial system. We are a supervisor of banks and insurers. And here we also define some expectations vis-à-vis their climate footprint, their climate transition, the way they should set up governance in this regard. And since we defined expectations in order to get along with the transition pathway to the Paris objectives, we assess whether they meet the objectives or not. And when they are not meeting those objectives, there might be some capital issues for them, additional requirements, because we consider that they are at risk.
Okay, very interesting. And Vincent, just when it comes to data-driven decisions in your business, where has, for example, carbon pricing influenced your investments?
We price, I mean, Gilles was mentioning that we price everything we're doing. So we know exactly when doing something. We're doing a renovation of a product, and we are in a business where we renovate and innovate regularly. We are able to assess, the level of CO2 we are rejecting, and also what we are not wasting anymore. This project I was showing you on La Vélo, minus 40% CO2 emissions, for example. And this is a way we assess, every time a marketing team is coming with a very great idea, we are looking at that, and this is one of the most important KPI. Used to be, in the past, are we able to increase the gross margin of the product? Yes, still there, obviously. We are not, we are not an NGO, but we are looking also at the way the CO2 emission this thing is rejecting. And that makes, the way we drive innovation very interesting, because in a way also, we transform, and that's the best scenario, we transform a positive constraints, we want to reduce the CO2 emissions, into a positive messaging, we use also to know, we didn't know if we had to say openly to our local Euro consumers, we have changed the formula, because they might be afraid of that. We have tested that, and we see that we better say, we have changed the formula for good reasons, for green reasons, and this is what you have today, and that makes a big difference.
You're nodding along there, something to add?
Sorry,
you want to add, weigh in there?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to the data, and I think I mentioned, reduction of CO2 can be viewed as a constraint, but just to exemplify a bit what Vincent said is that it's also multidimensional. I'm going to kill a few preconceived ideas as an example. It's not because you are more natural that you are more sustainable, by the way. And by the way, there are more naturals which can have allergies on skincare as opposed to more artificial. So it's all, and there are things which are more biodegradable than others. So it's already trying to live this transition, but managing multidimensional, obviously the cost, because nobody wants to pay for it, the biodegradability, the more naturality, not having an impact on the biodiversity, and the more the data actually helps, going through these complex multi-dimensions optimization, and not just one single one on CO2, the more we are equipped and do something which are the right things for nature at the end of the day.
And Vincent, just coming back to you when it comes to customer demands and consumers, what we mentioned a little bit earlier, how are they driving your new investments in new products?
We do, this has become an obsession for us. So everything we do, there must be a sustainability reason. It's not always the main reason.
And when did this obsession start?
Started a few years ago. I think CDP was also a trigger, because we wanted clearly to be best in class. It was not a priority for us in the past. I must say we came pretty late, later than a company like L'Oréal, for example. But we loved, the CDP as a way to measure in a very objective way the progress we're doing. It's a nice marketing story in a good sense with a big M, And we say, okay, let's make it happen. We have a value chain which is pretty simple. We start by the formula, then you have the packaging, you have the production. And we are able to look at all these elements, and we have been able, and this is why the CO2 calculation was absolutely essential, to be able to assess exactly what we're doing, and to force and to accept also the price increase. This is the most important thing. This is something which was for us a game changer. We say, yes, we can we have to bear the cost, and we have to because it's natural. Our consumers are expecting that, so we will try to minimize it, but it has become a trigger, and there are things you can. What is very interesting in this industry is that we are competing with. We are big competitors. I mentioned L'Oréal, I could mention Puig, Unilever, but we have this. I mean, Barbara Lavernos was using the word co-petition. We are also working in a sense together because we are super happy with one of us has found a new way to be better, to be green. Give you an example, pump. To have a recyclable pump was something that a few years ago was not existing. One of us found it, we developed that. I'm sure, Gilles, also, you're looking at what Firmenich is doing and vice versa, in order to be sure that we are best in class. It's very interesting, CDP, 10 companies got AAA, 4 or 5 of them are in the cosmetic beauty industry. That's interesting, because it means that this industry is particularly willing, to be best in class and to deliver the right product.
And speaking of best of class, as you mentioned earlier, your city has been the best, top of the class as well when it comes to CDP, an A-list city for 5 years in a row. How has your disclosure to CDP helped you when it comes to improving access to finance for projects?
First of all, about this data and kind of measurability, I think it's so important in this kind of business when you're talking about climate issues, because there is also quite a lot of greenwashing around and also kind of different kind of measures that maybe are not so transparent or benchmarkable. And that's why I think it's very, very crucial for us. We have been very early days when we started to do our climate work already like 15 years ago. So we started reporting. We have been reporting for the Covenant of Mayors. We have been reporting to the CDP, and we are following the SEGAP model in the European Union. And that's why we have been able to show that we are actually going somewhere. And I was mentioning that we are going to be carbon neutral by 2029, which is kind of
around
soon.
the corner.
So, but we know that we are on the track. We have already reduced our emissions by 60%, and we can show it and how it's been done. And that we know that we are going to be there. And that's where also it comes for the CDP or these other measures that I think it's very in the heart of this credibility for the cities to show that they are delivering what they are promising, and not only like being politicians and promising, but really doing something, that you have the measures, you have the data. And I have not been so engineer-minded person earlier, but I've learned to love the data just because of that you can really show what you're doing. And when you put your goals, you know that you are going to be there while you have these measures. And that's why I think it's so very important that we have this platform like CDP, and we have the other platforms, and even in the future, maybe not so many platforms that we have at the moment would be even nicer.
What a catchphrase there. I've learned to love the data. That's one takeaway we'll be taking away from this afternoon awards. But also from your perspective, a similar question on the company side. How has disclosing data to CDP and having, of course, the A-list score helped you when it comes to raising capital?
I'm a product of the French education, so you always, look at your scores, at school and so forth. So obviously the CDP scoring every year is like you need to make progress and everything. So it has helped us, obviously to make progress. That's part of it. One thing which has also, helped us. So we are a public company, so when you commit something publicly to your investors, you better deliver. And one third lever is really about, putting also the sort of at the end of the day, the sort of long-term incentive plan of our people, of many people at Givaudan, are very much geared and measured against achieving sustainability scores, diversity scores, and so forth. And when you start to actually, really moving the money, that's a bit the question mark, And so when you incentivize people, you also help, moving and making these decisions, different. So that all the levers that we have had, but certainly CDP scoring and trying to improve against that is certainly a great lever.
And just, Emmanuel, I'm going to turn around to look at you and get the perspective from the Bank of France, because we've heard some of the challenges raised on the panel already. But how then can the central bank uniquely support investment technologies that are currently unprofitable?
So there maybe the perspective would be around what we can do from a monetary policy perspective, because we are a very specific investor or actor in this regard, because we are the sole one in a financial ecosystem. So what we know is that that investors, because we are investors, we have like own assets to manage. We know that we can tilt our investments towards sustainable investments. So even though the reward, the rentability of it is, profitability is a lesser than the full set of possible investments. So it's possible because we did it and we are aligned with the Paris objectives. It's also possible to go ahead and to say, well, since we have a lot of risks, physical risks, transition risks with climate change, we have to take that into account, and we have to make it as a state of play and consider that for our investments, and maybe prefer some investments which will not be faced with those sort of risks. So there, we have already, from a Eurosystem perspective, so the ECB and the full set of national central banks of the Euro, already tilted our investments from a monetary policy perspective. The collateral framework, because we grant loans to the credit institutions and we take financial assets as a guarantee. It is also already providing for climate criteria, and we are also very eager to make the compliance with all the regulatory disclosures, the European one, a very important cornerstone of our monetary policy framework. So if a firm is not compliant with the CSDR requirements, it will not be eligible as a collateral for the monetary policy, which is quite a signal from a perspective from the banks, from the whole set of investors. And that's where we can act and we can send signal, because the biggest signal, it was mentioned, the carbon price is the thing which will trigger and orientate the flows, the capital flows. But where we can intervene is as an addition to that, in order to add some signals from what we can do.
That's what it's all about. And just from the company perspective there, what would move the needle most for your investments to flourish? Would it be, for example, collaboration with other businesses, policy, or capital markets? Vincent?
I think it's more the cooperation with other companies, and also the fact that the policymakers understand also the complexity of their decisions. You know, we created a few months ago, with L'Oréal, with Givaudan, with a lot of companies, a value of beauty alliance, which is something which we are using to talk to Europe, to talk to the policymakers together, and just to explain them the way this industry works. The fact that we will always try to be best in class, like in CDP today, but you cannot add constraints to constraints. You have to understand also the way we produce product. The fact that having different norms, for example, look at microplastics. You have 3 different definitions of microplastics. Which one do we follow? So being sure that the policymakers understand this industry, understand that we'll deliver, but have this collaboration with us in order to make it happen without damaging the economy. And there's something which I find extremely exciting. We are currently, all of us, working on the net zero target. Net zero target for us, for example, is 2045. You could say it's easy. I mean, we don't know exactly what will happen. The issue is that today, when you look at the net zero target, we know exactly how to decrease the CO2 emissions by 30%, no issue. We know partly how to make it minus 50%. To make it minus 90%, we have no clue. So which means that this is why also we are financing startups who are coming with a lot of new ideas, because we'll not be able, with the current setup in which we are today, we'll not be able to deliver a net zero target. And this is why we work together in order to cross-fertilize our energies and expertise in order to make it happen. And this is where the work together with the policymakers is also very important.
And this is why we've created lots of networking opportunities as well today for that magic to happen and those important conversations. Same question to you, Gilles?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm always hesitating, for more regulations and less regulations, because usually, sometimes you don't control how much those regulations take you away, maybe from being business friendly. So, but certainly the regulator has a role to play. Something that Vincent mentioned, is a great initiative on the value of beauty, but also companies collaborating, where there is a limit to that, because it's the same regulator who is asking everybody in Europe to save the planet, but the same regulator also asks everybody to remain competitive, including in sustainability. So there's already a contradiction there, where there is a limit to collaborating. The second thing is, obviously we are talking European community. We depend on a lot of supply chains all around the world, so the standards are not necessarily the same. So at least if there would be at least some alignment between the different regulators around the world, that's an ideal, maybe a bit idealist view, but that would be certainly helpful, because also Europe needs to remain competitive as such. So all of those things, would be very helpful. I'll give you one last data. Obviously, like Vincent, 95% of our footprint is scope 3. The easy part is to reduce scope 1 and scope 2, easy. But we know that 30%, 25%, 1/4 of our scope 3 is simply the grid, the energy grid, so which all our suppliers depend upon. So if that would become 100% renewable electricity, we solve 25% of reduction of scope 3 for everybody else. So that's what maybe the regulator, the Banque de France, or whoever, can certainly help as a whole, because that's where energy is.
Indeed. And now I'd like to take your perspective on this question about one novel financing model or strategy that you believe is key to moving the money for companies, and in your case for cities.
I think for cities it's very important to have this flexible and accessible financing, not only for pilot projects and funding, but also the larger scale investments, because that's where the big kind of effects are also. But then again, on the other hand, the collaboration and support is also very important. For many cities, they don't have skillful personnel or that kind of knowledge in their own cities. So these kind of networks, like for instance ICLEI, where I'm vice president at the moment, it's a global network where you can actually get a lot of support, as well as networking, benchmarking with the peer cities. And then third, I think, is that these kind of financings, green financing, like for instance European Investment Bank is supporting. So this is very good way to kind of give a little bit cheaper money for that requirement that you will, in the end of the day, do those requirements that you will deliver the green transition. So I think these are kind of the crucial things for the cities, which can actually make this transition to be real.
And you mentioned the European Investment Bank. In fact, the Luxembourg-based bank, will be speaking to Ambros Fayol a little bit later, the Vice President, to hear his perspective on that. But let's get your take on that same question there that I just asked about. One novel financing model or strategy that you believe is key.
Oh, that's a tough one.
If you'd like to take a minute to think about it, we could.
Maybe
Emmanuel?
One, from my perspective, we need to put together, private funding, public funding, bank, market funding, to find the adequate equilibrium, and to have shared data set in order for everybody to set on and to decide on the same basis. And maybe you were mentioning about the synergy effects and the capacity or disability to be on the same page where you are in the world. What we have decided, it's like 7-8 years ago, that climate change is a key topic for us as Central Bank, and that it was useless to get into that in isolation. So we have set up what we call the Network for Greening the Financial System. We went there, it was started in 2017, at a time when the US were not very keen to address climate change. We were a little bit in isolation. It was mostly European. Now we are more like 150 members, central banks, supervisors, acting together. We are a coalition of the willing and trying to share experiences, trying to put and define in common some common goods, and the scenarios for climate change, transitions, are one of the key tools that we developed all together. So synergies are there from the
Coalition, I like that. Coalition of the willing. It's a term that comes up a lot in Brussels where decision making can be very tricky. We're running out of time, but was there anything, any amazing idea you'd come up with there that you'd like to share?
No, I was thinking of there's one word we have repeated again and again, which is Europe. And it's also something when we work together with this value of beauty, we thought that we are lucky enough to have an industry which is mostly coming from Europe. And the beauty industry, the perfume industry, this is very strongly European. We want to work together. We are working together with the European Commission. We're working also in each of the member states. And having this European mindset in the way we invest, in the way we drive the sustainability, in the way we drive innovation, is the best way also to succeed. Because as Gilles said, the issue also that if we lose competitiveness versus China or the US for our own businesses, that's a nightmare, you know?
That is a nightmare. And there's weekly conferences on that topic taking place in the heart of the EU over in Brussels. But I'm afraid we have run out of time. A round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much.
Sure.
You can take your seats and enjoy the rest of the CDP Awards. Fascinating inputs, I must say. And we heard, of course, a mentioning there of the EIB, the European Investment Bank, that is based, of course, in Luxembourg, with a small office as well in Brussels, quite near the Euronews new headquarters as well. So just on that note, and on financing cities and the role of the European Investment Bank, we can cross over now to Luxembourg and bring in the Vice President, Ambroise Fayal, to find out what more the EU's Climate Bank is doing to power sustainable urban development, and, of course, the role of data and disclosure, because that is, of course, why we're gathered here, to talk about that crucial role of data. So, Ambroise Fayal, so lovely to see you. Can you see us and hear us?
I see and hear you very well. Welcome. Hello from Luxembourg.
Lovely to have you with us. Can you just firstly spell out for us how big is the investment gap that our cities all across the continent face?
Well, what I can tell you is, we are telling in trillions here, what I can tell you is a few things about what we do at EIB to try to contribute to filling this gap. And we are, over the last 5 years, we have contributed 91 billion euros in investment in urban and cities. That means around 80 to 20 billion a year. So this is one of the major activities of the EIB. And it fits actually something that we try to do, which is to have an integrated approach. Two-thirds of that is related to climate and environment projects. And you know that the EIB is transforming itself to become the climate bank of the European Union. And that is clearly a big part of what we have done to come to 60% of our investments that are now targeting green investments and sustainable investments. What we also do is to enhance resilience. Of course, it goes with adaptation that has to be developed in cities, but also, for example, cyber threats that we try to integrate as well as digital in our investments. Now, in terms of sectors, 2/3 is on 3 sectors: sustainable mobility, water, and health and education. Of course, housing and affordable housing is also part of that. And I think this is what we try to do, to have an integrated approach. That's what is important when you deal with urban city issues. And we try to do that both inside Europe and also outside Europe.
And how are you measuring the return on investments with these projects?
Well, we do that as we do for most of the projects that we have, which is we are a public bank. So we do not only measure, of course, we are a bank. So we expect that the loans that we do will be reimbursed by our partners and our clients. But we measure profitability and rentability from not only from a financial and economic standpoint, but also from an environmental and social standpoint. And that's what the combination of that is what our mandate is. So we cannot concentrate only on financial issues. We have also to assess, and that's a big part of our due diligence, what is the environmental impact and the social part of the project that we finance.
And I don't know if you were listening in, but we just had a panel discussion and we touched on the fact that cities are facing serious challenges here when it comes to accessing funding from the private sector. What do you think is missing here, and what specific concrete technical support can the EIB offer?
Yeah, actually, I mean, it's a good point, because what we see is there is something that is missing, that is in the work of project preparation. What we have is instruments to help cities put in place this comprehensive approach that is needed. And for that, let me just give you an example inside and an example outside of Europe. Inside Europe, we have a program that is called ELENA, that is on energy efficiency. And this is a program that, that we implement on behalf of the European Commission. And that helps cities or even agglomerations to put in place, to prepare the right projects for energy efficiency that they would not have without us. For example, in a small city, in an agglomeration, how do you put in place the best project that makes the most sense? Is it with a hospital in terms of energy efficiency? Is it with a hospital? Is it with a housing for seniors? Is it on a public building? This is what we do. I've just visited 2 weeks ago in southwestern France, in the Basque Country, very, very interesting projects that are in this big city of Bayonne. And that's exactly what we try to do. Outside of Europe, we have a big program with the World Bank, with the support of the German and the Luxembourg governments, that is called the City Gap Fund. And that is extremely interested also in terms of trying to put projects that to prepare as early as possible, so that we try to do the most impactful projects. And that works very well. We have actually 200, we have reached the 200 cities that have been supported by this project. And it is out of 450 requests from cities. And it is all over the world, in Africa, but also in Latin America. So very interesting project. And the second thing that I think can help is what we can do to try to ourselves, as a bank, to be more agile. And that is in the direction of using more framework loans. Framework loans allow to have more agility when you have to implement it step by step or sector by sector. An example that I have in mind is what we have done in Florence, where there were many issues related to urban policies. A big part was mobility, but a big part was also water, drainage, this kind of projects. I think the combination of that can help bring private sector investors, plus the thing that was discussed also, which is on data. That has also an impact. Data can help bring private sector.
Well, data, of course, our ears popped when you said that word, because we're here celebrating the CDP awards, so it's all about data. But how exactly does the EIB plan to incorporate data disclosed by cities to further support its urban investment strategy, Ambrose?
Well, actually, we use this data to our own due diligence. I mean, we are very, very pleased with with what CDP is developing in terms of data. We think it is very good in terms of better understanding the challenges in cities, in helping us in due diligence. For example, when we do a rapid bus in Africa, it is quite helpful to have the best possible data, also anticipation of what's going to be the demand forecast, so that you do less mistakes, basically. And also, I think it's important in terms of accountability, transparency. That's also what brings investors, because especially for green investors, they need this kind of data. And the word that I would just add is, in terms of data, what you do in CDP is really, really good. But it's not only on urban data. We are making progress in many things in terms of allowing people to have more data. One example that we have worked on with other multilateral development banks and with a number of bilateral development banks is a project called GEMS, that is basically a credit risk database. And for the first time yesterday, we have released data that have been collected from all different sources. And actually, you see first the interest of doing this. This is a project that was requested by the G20 member states. But also, you see the interest in terms of forcing institutions to do a better job in having data, in collecting data, and in publishing data. So well done, CDP.
So well done, CDP. Well, a round of applause for CDP and to everyone in our audience. Ambrose Fayal, thank you so much for being with us virtually here today. We're sorry you couldn't be here physically, but thank you so much for those contributions. And thank you also to Max Weiss, who was up on stage earlier, to Santiago Lefebvre, and also to our panelists. And thank you to you. You've been an excellent, attentive audience. I'm pleased to announce now it is time to stretch your legs, have a coffee, a catch-up, but just a quick one. 20 minutes you have downstairs in the Salon Champ de Mars, and we'll be meeting back here in 20 minutes for our second panel of the day, which is about how to radically transform the economic system as we know it. So see you in 20 minutes. Thank you so much.